From Washington, this is the HPS Macrocast with Hamilton Place Strategies and Markets Policy Partners.
Good morning and welcome to our annual Black Friday edition to the Macrocast. It's Tony Fratto coming to you from hills of Western Pennsylvania, Brendan Walsh and John Fagan from Markets Policy Partners with us today, and our great friend John Dick, who we love to have on especially when we're ever talking consumer attitudes and retail. We're going to get into talking about the holiday season this week. Look, it's Turkey week, and so we're recording ahead of time on Friday. But there's some of the things we're seeing this week. First of all, probably the biggest news is not quite a concession, but the allowance of what is going to look like a peaceful transfer of government. President Trump allowing President-elect Biden to access resources for the formal transition team and all that entails in planning for the inaugural. Vice President Biden has also started to name his staff, including members of his cabinet. The biggest one from our, that always piques our interest is Treasury Secretary, and we found out that that's going to be former CEA chairman, former Fed chairman, Janet Yellen, coming back into government. So we'll get into that as well. And then the other big news that's really dominating, economic activity right now is this. I don't know if it's the second surge or the third surge of COVID, and it's following the usual pattern of a big increase in positive cases, a very big increase in hospitalizations, and now that with that following the lag, we're seeing return to the average number of deaths over 1,000, some cases, some days approaching 2,000 deaths a day. So we're still, have this overhang of COVID. But then we also saw the news this week, additional news on vaccines and even on some of the therapeutic drugs. So we know that in the future, starting in the not too distant future, and certainly well into the spring and summer of 2021, we're very likely to see mass distribution of vaccines here in the United States and elsewhere. But what is this looking like for economic activity right now as we head into the holiday shopping season? This is usually the time of year that retailers are they make their bones in the period between Thanksgiving and New Year's. John, how are consumers thinking about it? John Dick and John Fagan and Brendan, how are markets paying attention to this?
Well, I mean, the consumer is certainly in a dark space right now. Certainly, we're seeing, some of the things we track around sort of people's comfort with being in public spaces is worse than it was even at the end of March. Really super high levels of concern for those kinds of things. Interest in eating at restaurants has plummeted to numbers we haven't seen since the spring. Shopping in store has been declining the last few weeks. Confidence shopping in store, but it's not nearly as bad as we saw it in April. I think people feel, if I wear my mask, stores do a pretty good job of keeping things safe. But we're still only roughly around half of U.S. adults who say they're comfortable walking into a store to shop for something other than essentials like groceries or what have you. So that's kind of the bleak end of it. There is the evidence of hope or optimism on the horizon. We see it twofold. One is a significant increase in people who say they'll be likely to get a vaccine when it's available. Those numbers were trending in the wrong direction for a long time, and the election had some impact on a jolt to those numbers as well. And then the other question we've tracked very closely is, how long do you expect this social distancing to continue? And we actually saw it at its highest number about a month ago. People feeling like the further we get into it, the longer it's going to last. But with the vaccine news the last few weeks, that number started to fall down. So it's kind of a mix, but I think in the short term, consumer-related activities are kind of at a dark phase at the moment.
Yeah, from the market perspective, really the clearly we've seen a more muted response to the successive announcements over the last 3 Mondays of very positive and effective vaccine trials. The first one, obviously, Pfizer and BioNTech coming out three Mondays ago, and that shocked the markets higher. It was that was something that really generated a specific response that you could see really across global financial markets, and each successive announcement has been a little bit more muted. Understandably, this gets into the price, but market participants, as we talked about in the last episode, have been kind of caught on the hop here a little bit between the challenging near-term outlook and the more encouraging vaccine news, and that means that the relative attractiveness of some of the pandemic winners like your Pelotons and so forth and Zoom have those relative they've
waned.
They kind of come off the boil to some extent, but it seems a little bit early to get excited about the cyclicals. Although we've seen this week a renewed focus on growth and growth oriented companies that are more levered to the growth story. Some of that really is about the pick, as you said, the Janet Yellen selection for Treasury is a very pro-growth signal. So,
market participants are seeing that as dovish. I mean, I know that's like the sort of like the traditional tab on Janet Yellen. I don't really like the Dove and Hawk.
You kind of made her career talking about deficits, early in it.
Yeah. Well, which some progressives were not happy about the pick for that reason. She's unduly burdened by concerns about debt.
Yeah, well, she presided over a very difficult period to transition from the predominantly easing focused Bernanke years into a tightening cycle. She was the one that shepherded the Fed through that and financial markets through that. Market participants have a high comfort level with Janet Yellen. So that is certainly one of the positives. Her tenure as Fed chair was widely admired. She was seen as having a firmly pro-growth orientation, a demonstrated understanding of financial markets, obviously, and her a moderate track record on the regulatory front. Her expertise in labor market economics is particularly apt now, given that we're going to be coming out of a pandemic that has produced mass unemployment, and so that's going to be a particularly strong attribute for her. And she's uniquely placed to coordinate policy with the Fed. And we saw just last week this rift between the Treasury and the Fed, really denting market sentiment there. Yeah. And she is a perfect antidote to that kind of concern.
But it is interesting, Tony, where she's painted as this uber dove, but post crisis, she was the only Fed chair to raise rates at all.
Yeah, I don't think those labels make sense at all.
No, and I think it's just kind of a lazy market narrative that very nice woman, so she's viewed as a uber dove.
Yeah, definitely, and she's but to John's point, she is, in fact, with all of the Biden picks, like these are all known quantities. There's no one, very little on the job training for the top jobs in government, and whatever you think about the direction they're going, when Janet Yellen goes to the G7 finance ministers meeting there's usually one in February, it won't be her first. She's been to 10 of these things before, and so she knows how they go. She knows her counterparts. She knows here in the United States, she's familiar with people on the Hill. She's familiar with people in finance and economics. She's even familiar with, industrial leaders and labor leaders as well. So,
and at the same time, her stature is so great that she is, for the politically minded commentators, she is a fantastic pick in that she will be able to communicate well with the left-leaning elements in the Democratic Party. She's so unimpeachable, and she's got such strong credentials really across the board. She's not seen as a creature of Wall Street, which would have made any Biden secretary that really had that market background would have been kind of a lightning rod to some extent. And she is she's a perfect balancer and sort of a soothing presence for the left-leaning elements of the party. Despite
she does have a big job ahead of her. I mean, John talked about the COVID, the resurgence, and John went through some of the numbers on how people are diminishing economic activity for them. We're seeing some of that with credit cards also, and first order, regardless of what happens in the fall here with the remainder of the Trump administration, some economic stimulus is still needed, and so
and that's why her existing relationship with the Hill is so important. She doesn't have to wait 6 months to learn how to deal with it. She can go up on day one to the Hill and start knocking on doors and telling people how important this is.
Right, and restarting some of the programs that Secretary Mnuchin has announced would be not renewed. There's still residual money that'll be left over at the Treasury, and there's already speculation that she is, uniquely well placed to get those going again in, whatever capacity they can operate in diminished funds, but at least to put them back in place as a backstop for credit markets and municipal and Main Street lending.
Yeah, and I think that'll be welcome. I mean, something quick there, and some some additional. The other pieces of stimulus or care or COVID support are pretty clear. We know that unemployment, enhanced unemployment benefits are running out. Still got to do something with PPP, or additional on PPP. Airlines probably still need support. So there are pieces out there. If we're seeing the surge in places that are having a tough time coping with it, so the increased cost for hospitals, schools, I think.
Are you hearing, Tony, anything about the prospects for even a mini deal here in the lame duck session, now that maybe some of the partisan passions have cooled a little bit as
nothing new, so forth? Nothing new. I don't have anything new on that, and there was certainly I had optimism that they would be able to get something done. They would try to get something done fairly quick after the election. You get the sense that the administration is somewhat checked out, and not so much checked out in that you get a sense that they're not interested in leaving full cupboards for the incoming administration, and so you don't get that sense of urgency that existed before Election Day, and also the Senate is really just focused on Georgia. And so you don't get the sense that they're engaged either. And in fact, they went home for the holidays. So if it happens, it's not going to happen soon. But we still like to see and still think odds are lean towards getting a small package done, because we still have the budget issue, right? We're going to run out of budget authority in a few weeks. So that's an action forcing event. Something needs to happen, and we can imagine something wrapped in that, but we don't have solid intel on what that's going to be.
Hey, Tony, you asked me about the consumer, and I jumped straight to COVID and skipped over, our economic sentiment index comes out tomorrow.
Yep.
Or later today, maybe. It's not pretty. It's looks like a double black diamond. If you see the drop is as steep as it's been since the very beginning of the pandemic, and it's impossible to decouple consumer confidence from COVID confidence, right? We know those things are super correlated, but attitudes towards the job market, personal finances, the overall economic outlook are all just super bleak. And we do know what stimulus did to jolt those numbers the first time around, right? And we also know what happened when the first wave of stimulus ran out, what happened to those numbers. So the consumer is pretty closely in tuned to that activity. We may feel like it's sort of a wonky thing for us to talk about, but it's covered enough in the news that the consumer reacts to it, and it could certainly help boost consumer confidence immensely to see even some progress toward a package before the end of the year, or as soon as possible.
And do you think that we're far enough from the election that people's happiness or sadness over who won isn't really being factored into their opinion of the economy, that this is really just things are getting bad?
Yeah, it's fascinating. Great question, because we saw such an instantaneous reaction to that in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
We knew Republican consumer confidence just skyrocketed like the day after Trump was elected.
It went up. Yeah.
Oh, it was wild. But we've not seen the quite same reaction this time.
Interesting.
Now, maybe it's because there's still a large percentage of those Republicans who don't think the election's over yet.
Right.
Frankly, and maybe they never will. Right. It might be January 21st until we see that happen, but there doesn't seem to be showing up in the numbers.
So what's your sense on what consumers plan to do then, John? I mean, if you're looking at looking ahead right now, like when we have the really robust holiday shopping season, people are buying things for themselves. They're making charitable donations, and including buying gifts. We're not sure right now. It's somewhat controversial that whether people are going to get together for Thanksgiving. I think we all talked about how we're all having small Thanksgivings this year rather than the full tables. We're only weeks away from Christmas.
Yeah. And actually Thanksgiving, we have Canada as a test case. 2 weeks after Canadian Thanksgiving, their infection rate spiked.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. So knowing that, yeah.
I mean, as a geek, it's like I'm so fascinated by, because this is really unprecedented. We really have no idea. I mean, the smartest economists who study these things in the world can't tell you what's going to happen in the next month, because we've just got conditions and ingredients of this that have never happened before. I guess a couple of things I would tease apart. The person in me who's confident we're going to have strong retail looks at, first of all, people are ahead of schedule this year compared to years past in terms of how much of the shopping they've already done, because a lot of us are at home in front of our computers and just ticking things off. There are large sectors of the consumer population who are significantly better off financially than they were a year ago. We talked about this the last time I was here. If you think about all the money we haven't spent on vacations and summer camps for our kids and travel sports and all those kinds of things, there's a lot of pent up cash in family bank accounts that can go to large ticket Christmas items. One thing that was just sort of a reporting nuance, as you probably know, the Fed's had a difficult time over the last several years tracking holiday spending, because there are categories of what are considered experience categories that are more difficult to track than retail, right? And so the belief was those things were stealing away from dollars I would spend at Target or Best Buy or whatever, because I was buying sports tickets for my kids or concert tickets. Well, those experience categories are zeroed out, right? So those huge categories of expenditures are not going to be drawn down in December, and they're probably going to shift to more traditional categories of retail. So that's kind of the confident person in me for sure. The problem is we've got just as many losers at the other end of the spectrum as well. Lots of people who don't have the money that they had. Yeah. The big question is do the people who have the money, will they spend more than the people who don't have the money will spend less, right? It's going to be, there's sort of a bell curve I think we're going to see. And I just don't think anyone knows yet.
Yeah.
Right?
The restaurant industry is an interesting example of that, where 1 out of 6 restaurants have now gone out of business. And in terms of a survey that was done last week, 25% of existing restaurants do not think they can make it through the winter. So we've lost 2 million restaurant jobs. If we lose another 25%, that'll be another 3 million. So we have 5 million restaurateurs out of work. Right,
but with this is not to sound harsh, but the people in those jobs are not the biggest spenders in the holiday retail season.
Right.
It's just when you add them all up, how much do they amount to in the overall spend? And again, it's just sort of a kind of a bell curve phenomenon. And maybe a little bit off topic, but one thing I was just studying this morning before we got together was we've been tracking people who so now there's lockdowns are happening again. There's a big deal in Pennsylvania. The governor announced yesterday that the bars are not allowed to have on-premise consumption Wednesday night. They're trying to keep people away from the bars just Wednesday night, and everyone's sort of freaking out about it. So we have some tracking questions asking people whether they've how often since the pandemic started were they turned away from a bar or restaurant because of a capacity mandate. And it's like 7% of consumers said that that's ever happened to them even once, right? What that tells us is that includes when restaurants were at 25% capacity and 50% capacity.
Yeah.
It is not the mandates that's keeping consumers away from these restaurants. It's fear. And so we don't suspect that fear is not going to subside over the next 6 weeks.
Yeah. Well, so earnings season is coming to an end. And when you aggregate it all up, earnings were down 6.5%. But if you take away the shutdown industries, airlines, restaurants, amusement parks, we were actually slightly up. So it's kind of similar to the consumer where
absolutely
there's winners and losers. Yeah.
And when we see this uneven rollout of a vaccine, it is, depending on which demographics get it, which regions get it, how it's going out into the population, it's really going to play very strange games with economic data, and it'll be that will certainly be something that is, obviously directionally positive, but certainly uneven and fascinating. It'll be fascinating.
Yeah, I'm not sure people are fully prepared for the cultural and ethical challenges we have ahead with vaccine distribution.
Yeah. So Qantas has already said you have to prove that you took it to get on an international flight. And China really basically wants to put barcodes on all their citizens to be able to scan them to see if they took it.
They want them for other reasons. Barcodes.
Yeah, this is an excuse to accelerate that plan. That plan's been in work for a little while.
I mean, the barcode in lieu of a chip, but that's the point. So I saw that announcement with Qantas also, right? And so you start asking questions like, well, what does that mean for movie theaters or clubs? Do you need to show that you've for all of these indoor close quarter venues, do you need to show that you have?
Yeah. And the thing is, now we have the technology to easily do that, especially with your phone. So it's not a question of can we do it? It's a question of are we going to do it?
Yeah, they can't rely on Scouts Honor, right? I mean, there was an article earlier this week that said that the lockdown in South Australia, to a great extent, emanated from one restaurant where a worker lied about their COVID status, and that's it's unfortunate, but that's the kind of that standard of proof, a standardization of understanding it's of the results. It really is going to be. It's going to be a big societal debate.
It's true. Now you do have, even with, even with relatively low levels of vaccinations, and we'll have relatively high, rates of vaccination. You do get herd immunity, right? So just the incidence of COVID go down considerably when it doesn't have, new hosts to transmit to, right? It just runs into dead ends. Because there just aren't enough people to share it with, presuming it doesn't morph into different forms of COVID.
The sense, Tony, is that we'll still have to protect, the sort of vulnerable, whatever. They'll even right because and so that playing the crystal ball forward, that tells me I think things like sports and concerts and bars and clubs, those kinds of things feel better for me. I still worry a lot about like Broadway and symphony and because that is their customer base is the vulnerable population. So
it's vulnerable. It's indoor. It is. They are. I mean, if anyone spent time, especially in New York theaters, the seats are very close. It's very tight. And And so, yeah, these are, these are big challenges. And then the challenges of who goes first. you know, as I think we've kind of talked about this a little bit before, but there's some people who, like some of us would like to see, teachers and doctors and frontline service workers getting it first, and some of those teachers and doctors and frontline service workers would like to see other people get it first, because they're not confident. So building confidence in the vaccines, I think is just it's a super important communications.
Yeah, but I think we're so much closer than people realize. So the Pfizer's FDA hearing is December 10th, and they said they're ready December 11th. They have 20 million doses ready to go. So they want to start doing the front lines, and they expect by January to be able to have enough to start with the elderly. So this isn't like months away. This is weeks away where people are going to have to make these decisions,
Yeah, we'll see whether we're ready for it or not. All right, why don't we take a break here and we'll come back and catch up and look ahead. You're listening to the Macrocast.
Markets Policy Partners provides sophisticated financial market analysis that is independent, accessible, and actionable for a broad audience. Learn more at marketspolicy.com or visit them on Twitter @marketspolicy.
And back on the Macrocast for the special Black Friday edition. We're going to be looking ahead to next week in December. We've got, we're going to have payrolls coming up at the end of next week. But before, just think about Black Friday, John Dick. Does it matter anymore? I mean, are people buying on Friday the deals? I mean, are they doing the doorbuster deals? I don't want anybody busting down doors.
No, definitely
in front of Walmart and wherever this year, do they?
I mean, I think you'll still see people doing it. I mean, if you think about the political cohort who's more likely to line up and do that, there might be a number of them that are pretty cavalier about things. So that's part of it. The other factor
is those wild scenes of like people tumbling over top of each other and fighting over the doll or whatever the hot gift is.
Yeah,
we're not going to see that this year.
No, we won't see that. I mean, the stores have capacity limits. They probably have to try to maintain to even prevent that.
I think Walmart said they're not even opening on Friday, or they're not going to allow they're not going to open at the middle of the night.
Thanksgiving.
Yeah, but I think, like we saw in the spring, different retailers will perform differently because of the cohort of people who shop at that retailer. And there'll be a little bit of nuance to that. But the other factor is that Black Friday's become more of a concept than it is a day, right? It's like, basically Black Friday is any shopping you do before December 1st, pretty much at this point, because they call everything a Black Friday deal. And also too, when you factor Cyber Monday into it, which had creeped up to Black Friday in years past in terms of volume, it's not as novel anymore because people, the idea of I'm going to sit at home on Monday and shop on my computer. I've been sitting home and shopping on my computer since March, right? So
like Cyber 2020.
Yeah, it's basically Cyber 2020. So a lot of people are ahead of the game on that. So no, I think the novelty of the days and the experiences are diminished immensely, both of them. And certainly, the idea of people lining up and barreling into a store to grab the latest doll off the shelf, that's not going to happen this year.
Yeah, I think it definitely need. I think we're definitely going to need an asterisk on whatever accounting measurement metrics on Cyber Monday or Black Friday this year,
and maybe the whole holiday season. To be honest with you,
yeah, guys. This jobs report. We've been anticipating that. At some point, stimulus runs out, people's capacity to buy runs out. We've recovered as far as we can recover without a vaccine and additional stimulus. And maybe we hit that in November. And if that's true, we should see that in this jobs report, right?
Yeah. And it's still a little early. We have a week left of the month, but the estimates that are coming in range from, what we've been doing, 500, 600, 700,000 to some people think it could be zero or slightly negative, that would be a shock to the market.
Yeah. So, it's going to be, but I think it's going to be a big report. I mean, this is an indication, as you said, we've seen the decline in weekly initial claims. They have come down, but they've come down very, very slowly and way more slowly than.
Yeah. And last week they stalled out. Yeah. But if this is where this is by far the most important one since the whole thing started. We knew, 25 million people were out of job in March. And then we also knew you would bounce back to a certain degree. Now it's when stimulus is running out, the weather's getting colder. So some of the outdoor stuff is shutting, and we're going into the end of the year.
Yeah, bad number would give the Fed more impetus to signal additional easing. That's certainly a possibility. We've seen with the, lack of traction on the fiscal front, and Chair Powell and his colleagues really being, hammering the point home that more fiscal stimulus is needed. Secretary Mnuchin's withdrawal of the refusal to extend some of those programs puts the onus on the Fed here, and we'll see in the December meeting if they start talking about, or even bringing forward some potential increase in asset purchases or some other stimulus measures.
Well, it would definitely be good to see. I don't want to see a bad jobs report. I'd rather be surprised by a good jobs report. But if the numbers are coming in where we're expecting, and some of the other measurements of economic activity and sentiment that we're seeing, would love to see these guys spurred into action to push us into the new year. Yeah,
you would have to hope that a very bad jobs report would allow us to come together in some sort of bipartisan measure to at least give a couple $100 million to get us through to the new administration.
Yeah, definitely. All right, guys. I like this. I like our Black Friday tradition.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, great to see you guys. Great year. Thankful got y'all all for our Macrocast every week. Good fun, and certainly no shortage of things to talk about. And a big Jobs Day Friday next week. We'll have the great Matt McDonald with us again to go through the numbers. So hope you guys will have had a fantastic Thanksgiving, and we'll talk next week.
Thank you for listening to the HPS Macrocast. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and share.